The role of the Chief Information Security Officer, the CISO, is going through a seismic shift right now. We're talking about a world where the rewards have gotten massive, but believe it or not, the personal risks have never been higher. So, what does the future actually hold for security leadership? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive deep into the data to find out. Let's get right into it. So our guide for this breakdown is the 9th Annual Global CISO Leadership Report from a company called Hitch Partners. And this is a big deal. They surveyed over 625 security executives to really paint a detailed picture of the challenges and, the opportunities that are shaping the industry right now. So what did they find out? Let's take a look. Okay, let's start with a number that, it's definitely going to grab your attention. This is the average total compensation for a CISO who's working at a publicly traded company. I mean, it's a role that organizations are clearly willing to pay top dollar for. But that impressive figure, it only tells about half the story. And here is the other half. This number represents the percentage of CISOs at private companies who have absolutely zero executive liability protection. That's right, over a third of these leaders in one of the most high-stakes roles out there are personally exposed if something goes wrong. So you see this massive contrast, right? High rewards, even higher risks. This really frames our entire discussion today. How in the world are security leaders navigating this new landscape where the stakes are just so incredibly high? Let's break down the real story behind these numbers. Okay, first things first. To really get a handle on these shifts, we need to be super clear about who we're actually talking about. The report breaks it down into two critical roles in this whole evolving ecosystem. So at the very top, of course, you have the CISO. This is the strategic leader, the one who sets the vision, manages the risk, and has to communicate all of it to the board. They are, for all intents and purposes, the ultimate owner of the entire security program. And then, right below the CISO, you've got what the report calls the next-gen leaders. Think deputy CISOs, heads of security engineering. These are the folks who are actually on the ground executing the CISO strategy. And importantly, they represent the future of the CISO role itself. All right, now that we know the players, let's follow the two things that always reveal where an organization's real priorities are: the money and the power. The report shows some pretty fundamental shifts in both compensation and, crucially, where the CISO actually sits in the org chart. So, what's driving this huge $128,000 pay gap between public and private company CISOs? Well, it pretty much comes down to one word: equity. Public companies are using their stock as a seriously powerful tool to attract, and more importantly, to keep the best security talent in what is a fiercely competitive market. Now this right here shows a major shift in the power dynamic. Traditionally, the CISO would almost always report to the CIO, the Chief Information Officer. But just look at this. Nearly a third now report directly to the Chief Technology Officer or the head of engineering. That makes it the new dominant reporting structure. And let me tell you, this is a massive change. And this isn't just a fluke either. It's an accelerating trend, especially in private companies. So what's the big takeaway here? It means security is no longer just seen as an IT or a compliance function. Nope. It's now a core part of how products are actually built and how technology is managed. You could say security is moving closer and closer to the code. But, with all this new power and this great compensation comes a whole lot of new risk. So let's pivot and talk about the two biggest anxieties facing security leaders today: a serious lack of personal protection and this massive growing gap in AI governance. I mean, look at these numbers. They're pretty alarming. We saw that 36% of private CISOs are unprotected, but even 20% of public company CISOs are lacking coverage. Let me put it another way for you. If you're a CISO at a private company, you are 85% more likely to have zero executive liability protection than someone doing the same job at a public company. That's a huge difference. So what does this protection actually look like? Well, it typically comes in two forms. First, there's something called a D&O policy. Think of it like insurance for executives. And second, an indemnification agreement. That's where the company puts it in writing, in a contract, that they promise to cover your legal fees if something happens. The problem is, way too many CISOs have neither. Okay, on to the second major risk, AI. As fast as companies are adopting artificial intelligence, their security programs are, they're really struggling to keep up. Just how badly? A staggering 2%. That's the tiny percentage of organizations that have reached what the report calls an optimized level of AI governance maturity. Just 2%. It's wild. The good news, though, is that a standard is starting to emerge. Organizations are turning to the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, or as you'll see it, the NIST AI RMF. Basically, this is a set of voluntary guidelines designed to help companies manage all the risks that come with AI systems, and it is quickly becoming the go-to standard for building a responsible AI program. But a framework all by itself isn't enough. The problem actually runs a lot deeper, right down to the talent. This quote from the report is, well, it's very telling. The vast majority of leaders, 84%, aren't even sure their own teams can identify the right people to secure their AI systems. Think about that. It's a massive confidence gap that puts the entire organization at risk. So all this internal struggle with new tech like AI is happening while, at the same time, external threats are constantly evolving. So given all these internal pressures, where are leaders actually focusing their external defenses? Let's take a look at the threat landscape for 2026. The results on this one are crystal clear. At 43%, third-party risk management, what's called TPRM, is the runaway top priority. And this isn't just, number one. It's nearly double the concern over the number two threat, which is AI-enhanced attacks. What this tells us is that the supply chain, all the vendors you rely on, are now seen as the single biggest potential point of failure. So after all that, what do we actually do with all this information? Well, the report wraps everything up really nicely by putting it all together into a clear, actionable roadmap. It outlines 6 strategic imperatives for every current and every aspiring security leader. So here they are. First, leaders have to proactively close that public-private pay gap if they want to keep their talent. Next, they need to learn how to thrive while reporting to a CTO. They absolutely have to mature their AI governance and, just as critically, secure that personal liability protection we talked about. And of course, they have to focus on that number one threat, third-party risk, all while making sure they're developing the next generation of leaders to keep that talent pipeline full. And that really brings us to the final crucial question. The CISO isn't just a risk manager anymore. They are a core technical leader who is operating in an incredibly high-stakes, high-risk environment. So when you look at all these trends, the question we should all be asking ourselves is this: are we building the right kind of environment to support the security leader that we're all going to need tomorrow? And that's a wrap on our breakdown. Hey, if you found this look into the 2026 CISO report helpful, please do take just a second to click like and subscribe. Your support really is a huge help, and it allows us to produce more explainers just like this one. Thanks so much for tuning in.